Right, so I have the privilege to take you through this afternoon, and I'm sure you're going to get sleepy after all that nice lunch, so you have some coffee, that's great. This session, I will begin to speak a bit about the bigger picture and then go into the dynamics of styles in supervision, and then I'm going to get you to work so that we would know more from your experience and your local context. Hopefully we can use that to further advance both the structure and your role, and also your relationship to the PhD students. Hopefully some of the strategies that Ron has laid out can be sort of embedded in that sort of process. Right, a few things where I'm coming from and what I'm passionate about. So, I think before we are thinking about supervision and all the rest of it, I think it's good for us to think about, take one step back and think, what is the role of research in the society? And over the past 30 years, we have had a major shift in policy. So policy that directs research was firstly institutionalized across OECD countries around the time after the Second World War. And the idea was to ensure prosperity, health, and security and variations across countries. So that was the outset in which research was to be funded and the role it would play for bringing development of societies. Since the past, and that was then adopted in emerging and developing countries around 79, a bit later, depending on when people got independency, but it was at the conference 79 that also was adopted across a lot of emerging and developing countries. What we have seen the past 30 years, and that includes also emerging and developing countries, is that we have a shift from looking at research as a part of a broader commitment to the society to link it to the economy. So research is now a part of the knowledge economy, it's a part of the economic development, and hence the policy is around not only application and use of research, it's also this push that it should feed into the local industry, it should boost the industry, R&D, collaborations between university, industry is key to that. You have spin out, so campuses are building up facilities where you can, where startups are encouraged. Do you have that in Gajah-Mada? Yeah. You also have intellectual property rights has become a major issue because it's a part of the sort of economy and the collaboration across institutions and between industry. So the shift from, seeing more research as an holistic part of an input to the broader society, it's become very closely aligned to the economy. And when we are now supervising the next generation of students, we have much more of this sort of internship, we have co-supervision with industry, we're looking at research topics that are relevant to industry, etc. The risk with all this is that there's certain, not only that we need to have a basic or blue sky research going on in parallel to all this, that sort of make sure that some of the major discoveries is actually coming from more of the basic side. It's also narrowing our perspective and vision about research. And it's very common among colleagues in Europe, in Australia, etc., to sit on the defensive side to say, academics, they don't know how to engage with industry, put all the blame on to the academics all the time. And I'm pretty tired of that approach. I think it's a limited approach. And I just want to say that I think we need to also be a bit resistant to to that sort of framework. I'm sure that here, community engagement, improving practices, in particular in health practices, policies, are equally important as it is to have a patent to drive a commercial. I'm not saying that one should exclude the other, but we can't just look narrowly onto this. Another thing, in particular in countries we don't have a lot of R&D private capital, head offices that drives R&D investments, some like Germany, US, even in Australia we lack that. It may be strategic to use the graduate students to engage with the local industry rather than on the professorship level, because that is perhaps the level where people can absorb knowledge rather than to see it as a high end and as a failure on behalf of the universities. So this is an area of work and interest that I'm coming from. So I just wanted to share with you the broader picture before we jump in. I also would like to say that the one area that I thought a lot since I moved to Australia is this public understanding of research. So policy from research is now driven mainly of science and metrics, that's the rankings, etc. They have a historic background from Soviet Union and China. And the reason why it's been picked up is that it matches well with new public management theory and economy theory. So now we are measuring everything, but it has its roots from those settings, and often we forget that. Also, science, technology, and society. It used to be a very strong field of research, but that, and looking more broadly to what research does for society. But that has been diminished and replaced with this view. And that sort of exacerbates the narrow focus on the role of research, not only in academic literature, but also in policy practices. And they are spread by OECD and UNESCO organizations that I have worked for, and dear colleagues of mine. So the public understanding of research is something I think is also something to think about for you. Because me, coming from a country where we have high commitments, R&D, we have both private, international, and high percentage of public support to research. We have the Nobel Prize. Everyone, pretty much, on the street would say that research is important for our country's development. You wouldn't question research as a role for the society development. In Australia, it's not that clear, you know. It was on the radio just recently. The treasurer was interviewed at the radio, and then they said, look, the Research Council has sort of given funds to 3 different projects. And how is that value for money for the Australian taxpayers? So they went into, and the treasurer said, yeah, you're right, we should be more concerned about the relevance to the society. And he even admitted that they should allow for a pub test. A pub test in Australia means that you go out to the pub to check whether, is this a good idea? Yes, then you go ahead. If this is a bad idea, so it should be understood to the general public. In Indonesia, where the commitments to R&D is like 0.2 or something, very low, the public understanding of research is pretty low on all levels. So being a researcher, a supervisor, also means that you have a stronger, the burden for you to explain the role of research is much heavier than in other contexts. So that is also something to keep in mind, that you are in a way the ones that are the future to a stronger commitment to research, and you are in your different ways advocates for that. Yeah. I just wanted to begin with, so this is where I come from, and all this can be translated into institutional practices, etc. But I will not do that now. I will just move on to the supervision part. So just a little bit of background when it comes to Australia. So Australia doesn't have a long history of running PhD students. Australia is also a colony. So most of that would be done by the Brits. And hence it started off pretty much as a copy of the British system. It's over the past, fair to say, 15, 20 years, we have had a massive growth of PhD students. And then we came from this perspective that it was almost assumed that supervisors knew what to make successful supervision. And so with this presentation, I will bring some sort of theory into what this means, and then when I've gone through those few slides, we will then take that further and see what it means for you. Right? Okay. So factors, if we start with some factors that influences supervision styles. First of all, I would say that the country, the general country, as I said with the first slide, also has an effect. So it depends on where the country comes from, the commitment to research and the role research has played for the development of the country to begin with, and the local culture around that. But if we take that aside, then it's the organizational structure. That is also the history of the institution, where it comes from. If it's moving as you are, from heavy teaching into more research intent, that's a process that if you come from a very strong research culture, that is different. Then within that organizational structure, we have, particularly for in relation to supervision, it's structural factors. That's how you recruit the students, what sort of institutional frameworks that are put in place. You have accountability stages and regulatory stages. And then what sort of skills provision is provided in methods, in growing your PhD students. Then you have support factors, and that is more the personal supervisor. So that is how you support the students throughout the process. It's about materials, access to libraries, literature. It's financial, to what degree you are able to travel to conferences, being a part of an international community. Technical, to what extent laboratory or other technical equipment is available, or whether you have collaborations across. Then you have external factor, and that's who the candidate is. And in your case, you have an interesting mix. You have a combination of an upgrade of your institutional capacities, so people in high positions, as well as you have an inflow of younger PhDs, I would say. You have also a lot of people around this table have their PhDs from overseas, from different countries, and then you come back. That means you come with different academic cultures, and then that should blend in with Gajimada culture and your department culture, which is a quite interesting piece of work. I don't know how much literature is around this, but it would be a really interesting case study on how you build a department and an institutional culture led by academics from across different national academic culture, Germanic and English and Japanese and Australia, interesting mix. And then you also have the co-supervisors, the committees or reference inputs, etc. that are external. So this is just, since I come from political science, I always need to do a square with 4, you know, we always do this, so I've done this here too. So it's a grid that shows supervisory management attitude. So if you look at the structural factors that I talked about in the previous slide, you have low and high, and then support factors, you have low and high. So this is more the individual, and this is more the sort of institutional structure. And then you have, when it's low, low, that means that you're just less fair. So it's quite non-directional, and a lot of this is going on at University of Melbourne, I think. When you have more strong individual support factors, but low structural factors, you have more of a pastoral relationship. That means a tight relationship between the candidate and the supervisor, but you're very much led to the supervisor. Then it's more the directional, and that means that the structural factors within the institution are well in place, but the supervisor perhaps not as much. And then you have a more contractual framework, which means that it's regulated on both sides. The institutional support structures are in place, and also the individual relationship between the supervisor and the candidate is in place. So here we have some of a description of the various styles. So you can see yourself here that the candidate has limited levels of motivation and management skills often, and supervisor is not directive. But in Melbourne case, when I said I think we have quite committed candidates, but the supervisor might not be. So there are variations across this as well. And the idea is that the best outcome from an institutional side is that you have a contractual style. So you both have organized support mechanism within the institution and also work according to that with your PhD students. That said, dynamic changes over time. So it's not one way throughout the whole PhD journey. It may shift over different stages. It's also important to say that there might be particular areas of concern, and that's when abnormal conditions happens. It could be illness, it could be change of life circumstances, or it could be that you shift the thesis subject in the middle. You've gone through halfway and then decide to change. I have a few colleagues that have done that. Very traumatic, all sorts of stress-related diseases afterwards, I think. Yeah. So, what I'm going to do for you now is to have a little exercise where I have three parts. So, from your experience, what was helpful when you were a PhD student or a candidate in terms of what sort of organizational processes did you detect them, or did you think of them at all? But maybe you can do that now. What sort of accountabilities in terms of what was to be achieved was helpful, and what sort of skills did you get at the time that you thought were helpful? When we answer that, we're going to Uh, wait. So then to identify the current challenges as a supervisor and relate that to all three areas. So it's organizational accountabilities and skills provision. And then to see what you can do to improve the situation and perhaps what others that have more senior leadership positions could do to change the situation, to facilitate what needs to be done to improve the situation from where we are now and how you see it in the future. Does it make sense? Yeah? Maybe we move over, because we've been on this table for quite some time, so maybe we move over and take, would 3 groups be good, right? So if we take, should I count? Yes, 1. 2, 3. Great. The 1s are on that table first, the 2s on that, and the 3s on the one in the corner there. And we start, how much time do we have? So, okay, so what we do is I think a short term, like 3 minutes of own reflection and then sharing at the table, and then you can perhaps put down what you find helpful around those 3. So we do that 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes with the other 2. Yeah?
So we're doing this first question first?
Yes.
Oh, di sini dijatah-jatah ya. Kalau di sana kan nggak, kapanpun kita ada masalah.
Ya. Oh, kalau itu bisa, tapi untuk yang di kayak seminar itu presentasi hasil presentasi apa
meeting dengan
konsultasi sih, kalau untuk konsultasi enggak. Untuk yang jadwal seminarnya itu kan
seminar yang apa internal? Gor-gor Mbak, sistem rapat di Jepang. Maksudnya kan masuk PhD kan nggak ngerti. Jadi ada sistem biasanya research student, tetapi tidak
Nah, kalau di Jepang karena by research itu publikasi accepted.
Oh.
Waktu itu dengan waktu saya programnya 3,5 tahun dengan impact faktornya di atas 4.
Impact factor di atas 4.
Berarti itu tadi.
Dan saya 4.
Kalau di Australia itu dikatakan lulus kalau tesis dimasukkan ke examiner di 2 negara yang berbeda di luar Australia. Kemudian examiner.
Publish juga nggak perlu. Tapi memang kita sudah. Tapi itu biasanya wajarnya sudah. Tapi tidak dijadikan persyaratan karena biasanya sudah.
Nah, kalau di tempat kita waktu saya 2009 lulus 2014 itu 5 tahun. Tapi ada ujian terbuka.
Open close juga. And impact factor.
Enggak, number and
impact factor.
Impact factornya di apa reguler ki apa apa
International journal or nationwide. Ya.
wes skill professionnya apa?
Skill profession itu
Dikirim sih kayak misalnya harus ke Sukuba gitu kan. Dia
ya berarti itu konsultasi expert.
Enggak, tapi ya itu tapi
Beda lagi,
kurang
tapi ini kan lebih ke skill.
lebih ke
Jadi
skill.
lebih ke skill.
Teknisi.
Technical toh.
Kan dia
Skill toh iki.
Iya, ini teknis.
Ya kan lebih
Cara nulisnya ya. Oh.
ini sudah
Organisasional. Sistem organisasi. Tapi ini caranya di Jepang dan di sini sama saja.
Round up. We will have more time to talk because it's going to be a very participatory afternoon. So don't worry, you will have more time to talk. Who would like to start? Group one. Group through. Okay.
Oh, it's gonna be me. Okay. Me. I'm writing and talking. From which part? From which part first?
No, you decide.
Okay, so we are in a group of 4 coming from a different background for in our PhD process. He's from Indonesian, Australian, Japan, and Dutch. So we were basically did a quite different way in organization, accountability, and skill provision. But basically, we could see that in Indonesia it was applied by the promovendus, him or herself. They brought their own proposal, and then supervisor was appointed. Started with proposal exam, and the skill provision is based on what is the need from their research. No publication was required before 2014 with closed and open defense. With Dutch, we had 2 systems, curriculum-based and research-based, and everybody was recruited by the project. Publication is the main, and I had 3 months of probation. With Japan, it's the same, project-based, included funding, only 1 publication. The interesting part, if the promovendus is less than 18 years of education without kindergarten, they should have a time for research students. If it's around 18 years, then they could continue to PhD. While in Australia is almost the same as in Dutch. And the expectation included also from our discussion, or I just stop here?
No.
Okay, what we expect, there should be 2 different way of enrollment. Either comes from project-based, on which a PI is offering a project, that requirement of qualification also included, and the package should also include promoter and co-promoter, so supervisors already been appointed from the group, and also from the current system. But we expect the recruitment to be more tightened, not only TPA or IELTS and TOEFL, but also whether they have the capacity, the current capacity, in order to do the research. And also by having appointed a supervisor recommended to the right person. And the method of recruitment and supervision has to be able to measure and transparent. So that's our discussion in group through.
Thank you. Great. Any comments? Should we move to next? I'm close here, so we take group.
In our groups, you also comes from different countries to study PhD, but they make the fusion for from our experience. So we thought that a helpful as PhD student is in the organizational process is clear requirement, and then length of study is clear, and also type courses, supervisor name, who's, and how many supervisor that we need. And the second one is supported facilities such as a lab and expert consultation. It's also available. And the accountability, we thought that the things that helpful as PhD student is clarify of the step or milestone to complete the study, and the outcome is also clear. For example, number of publication, and how about the impact factors and international or national journal. And the last, in the skill provision, we thought that laboratory work assistants to do our works, such as our senior or technician. And then the second one is training before doing, such as lab work training, writing training, presentation training, and language. I think that's all from our groups.
Okay. On that note, then we move to the...
Okay, thank you from group 1. Here the member is similar as other group that among us we went for our PhD in different countries, to Germany, Japan, and here in Indonesia. And when we discuss and comparing, we saw several similarity and also several variation. So based on the question, what was helpful as a PhD student, we get the information that organizational process, generally speaking, well organized for the recruitment, and also there is a support for international research office support and grant support, especially for the person who get grant to Germany and Japan. But for the Indonesian, the grant is optional, in the meaning that there is some competition, and also certain people perhaps pay by themselves. Okay, and for the accountability, there is a matriculation process for certain people who need that at the beginning of the doctoral program study. But
Excuse me, what does that mean?
If I'm not mistaken from the information, this is to make them in the similar level in intellectual capability comparing with other students, because in some, especially because for international students, they came from different backgrounds, so need some adjustment for the knowledge level. For Indonesian also, because they came from different areas, so some of them perhaps need additional knowledge to get a certain level. Of course, yes, of course. And also regular supervising, generally speaking, and some general lecture is present also. For seminar, internal and international, they get information that they have chance to present our work to international seminar or even among our groups. So in the graduation based on publication for the Japanese graduation in Germany, but for Indonesian it's there is a choices whether by publication or by defense. Okay, the skill provision for Indonesian and Germany mostly self-driven, so they learn by themselves, but any method and methodology that they need for their course PhD program. But for Japanese mostly, because they are engaged in the grant, research grant provided by the supervisor, so mostly instructional, and also senior direction.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we get from our discussion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just one question of curiosity. Do you still have linkages to your home institution where you got your PhD, and do you collaborate across research projects? Yes? So that's no?
I have collaboration with other country, not
Another
with
country,
my...
not with your... Okay. But do you think it helped you to have your degree from elsewhere to collaborate with others?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Not no.
No?
No.
No?
Honestly
Okay.
speaking, no.
No? Okay. Because that is assumed in the literature, at least, that it's a very important factor for continuing internationalization and being a part of an international, scholarly community to keep linkages and from where the PhD took place. Right. Okay. It's sort of some good practices that were presented here in terms of what is required. Now I thought we move into your current situation as supervisors and think about the same aspects and what the challenges are that you currently face across organizational your interaction with your PhD students and also in terms of skill provision. You don't supervise as it is, not yet. You are on the training, okay. Expected, okay, you're expected. Okay, so then you don't, but from where you are now, do you see any challenges in terms of what the support structure is on the organizational level then? What sort of challenges it would be in terms of accountabilities or what you perceive? And in terms of the skills provision, from what you know of your institution and where you are at. If you can identify if you look ahead, if you can identify some areas that you would find challenging, maybe from your own perspective or from the structural perspective, or that you have question marks around. Okay? Clear?